Next on Newsmax Prime, reaction to Steve Malzberg's interview with Donald Trump and how New Hampshire voters are reacting to the campaign in their state. We'll take a look at the latest polls. Plus, it's all in the family. Barbara and George W. take to the stump and to TV, joining in with Jeb. But are voters already bushed? Also ahead, the Pentagon and Parenthood. Reports that the military may harvest eggs and sperm from soldiers in case they're badly wounded on the battlefield or don't come back. We hope you'll stay right here for news and opinion delivered the right way as Newsmax Prime starts right now. Good evening. Welcome to the Friday night edition of Newsmax Prime. I'm J.D. Hayworth. Of prime interest tonight, grinding it out in the Granite State. Miranda Kahn has polls and pronouncements as part of tonight's Political Pulse. Miranda?
JD, let's begin with the latest polling from New Hampshire. The new NBC News Wall Street Journal survey still has Donald Trump in the lead with a real battle for second place. In that poll, conducted Tuesday and Wednesday, Trump remains on top with 30%, as you can see. Marco Rubio moved up to second with 17%. Ted Cruz sits 2 points back at 15%. Then it's John Kasich at 10%, Jeb Bush 9%, Chris Christie and Ben Carson are at 4%, and Carly Fiorina rounds out the shortened field with 2%. Now, it's important to note that the survey says 7% of Granite State voters are still undecided. Meantime, a new national poll contains good news for a certain senator. The latest Quinnipiac poll shows Marco Rubio as the strongest Republican if the general election were held today. Right now, according to the poll, Rubio is the only Republican leading Hillary Clinton, and somewhat surprisingly, he's tied with Bernie Sanders. Senator Sanders leads both Donald Trump and Ted Cruz. Senator Cruz was on Newsmax TV yesterday saying Donald Trump was, quote, rattled. Mr. Trump was on the Steve Malzberg show earlier this evening and had this to say about Ted Cruz.
I'm not rattled. And, I said that he was having a breakdown a week ago, and people asked him the same question. It's what they say. It's one of those things. And, I heard somebody told me he made that statement. I'm not a rattler type.
Regardless, it's tough for any candidate to remain calm with so much at stake next Tuesday in New Hampshire. JD, back to you.
Thanks, Miranda. For more on all this, we're pleased to be welcomed by the president and CEO of the Family Leader, Bob Vander Plaats. Bob Skypes in tonight from out in Iowa. Meantime, Skyping in from the Big Apple, New York City, it's political consultant Roger Stone. Roger, of course, the author of Nixon's Secrets, The Rise, Fall, and Untold Truth About the President, Watergate, and the Pardon. Gentlemen, we appreciate the time from both of you tonight here on Newsmax Prime. Now, Bob, for purposes of full disclosure, you came out for Ted Cruz. Your endorsement may have helped make the difference in Iowa. But what about the rise of Marco Rubio? Should that concern the Cruz camp?
Well, I think it's just a great race right now. I think what happened in Iowa on Monday night, JD, just showed that the great ground game that Ted Cruz has, and even though he had to withstand a lot of incoming fire, everybody was shooting at him, he still prevailed in a record turnout in Iowa. And so now you bet Marco Rubio got a bump out of Iowa, and so you go into New Hampshire. I think it's going to be an interesting race. I think it's wide open between Trump, Rubio, Cruz, and you're still looking at Kasich or Bush trying to pop in there as well. But I think Cruz kind of feels like he's in really good shape right now as he takes a look at the nomination process.
Roger, Donald Trump says he's not rattled, but he is a first-time candidate. So what do you think his mindset is right now?
It's interesting, JD, all this focus, of course, on organization in the ground game is a classic example of generals fighting the last war. The truth is the New Hampshire primary is more media-centric than it is organizational-centric. Let's review history. Ronald Reagan lost the Iowa caucuses after refusing to do the final Iowa debate. He then came roaring back in New Hampshire, not on the basis of organizational superiority, but on the basis of a debate performance in which he demolished George Bush. We have a debate Saturday night. I think that debate will be pivotal in New Hampshire. I agree with Bob. This is a close race at the top, but at this point, I think Trump and Rubio are out front. I think it's a much tougher climb for Ted Cruz in New Hampshire.
You mentioned tomorrow night's debate. We should note that yet another debate has been added to the schedule post-New Hampshire. It's slated for March 3rd on Fox. Now, on the Steve Malzberg show earlier this evening right here on Newsmax TV, Donald Trump was asked about whether he will appear at that March 3rd debate, which once again will be moderated in part by Megyn Kelly.
I'll be there. I have no objection to being there. And that had nothing to do with Megyn Kelly. The fact that I went out of the last one, it had to do with a memo that was sent out by Fox that was a little bit taunting, and I said it was inappropriate. And what happened is because I didn't do it, I raised $6 million for the vets. So I wouldn't have changed places. I mean, I did the right thing.
Roger, the Donald says he did the right thing. You touched on it a little earlier about history and Reagan in Iowa as opposed to New Hampshire. But just between all of us looking in here, was it a mistake for Donald to sit out that final Iowa debate?
Well, I think Donald himself admitted that the late-breaking undecideds probably decided against him on that basis. On the other hand, again, that's the last war. The upcoming debate will be crucial in New Hampshire, and I'm delighted to hear that he will be at the next Fox debate, because I frankly think the more we hear from each of these candidates about issues, the stronger all of them will be, and the stronger the ultimate effort will be to defeat Hillary Clinton.
Bob, you run the family leader out there in Iowa. Speaking of family, the family Bush, all into Jeb's campaign as it becomes a family affair. First of all, we should note that the Right to Rise Super PAC has released a new ad that features none other than Jeb Bush's brother, former President George W. Bush. Let's take a look at it.
The first job of the president is to protect America. Our next president must be prepared to lead. I know Jeb. I know his good heart and his strong backbone. Jeb will unite our country. He knows how to bring the world together against terror, and he knows when tough measures must be taken. Experience and judgment count in the Oval Office. Jeb Bush is a leader who will keep our country safe.
So there's George W. on TV. The former president also headed to campaign in person for Jeb in South Carolina. Bob, do you think this will help or hurt Jeb Bush?
I don't know if it'll help or hurt. I do think Jeb Bush would have been benefited by using George W. and his family in Iowa. Iowa gave launch to the Bush family. But he really didn't want to engage them in Iowa. But now in New Hampshire, he seems to be like, let's bring them all together. People would rather rally around the Bushes. I happen to like Jeb a lot. I think he's just a great qualified governor, one who I'm not supporting. I'm supporting Ted Cruz. But I think his last couple of ads, the one about stopping Trump and now the one bringing in George W., have been most effective. I think they're going to be very effective in New Hampshire. But at this point in the game, JD, I don't know if it's a plus or a minus.
Well, let's talk about Mrs. Bush, Jeb's mom, George W.'s mom, Barbara Bush, now 90 years young, out on the campaign trail in New Hampshire. Listen to Barbara with her take on Jeb in dealing with an unnamed candidate.
He's so polite. We brought him up that way. And he does not brag like some people we know.
Who are you talking about?
I can't remember.
Do you think someone else that's running for president is bragging too much?
I'm not getting in a spitting match with him. He can spit further than I can.
All right, nobody has to spit. Roger, it's pretty obvious that Barbara's talking about Donald Trump. Your reaction to what the former First Lady had to say?
Yeah, it looks to me like she was hitting the vodka and orange juice a little too early this morning. Look, George W. Bush destroyed the Bush brand because his policies are identical to the policies of Obama after him and Clinton before him. Massive debt, endless war, erosion of our civil liberties, higher taxes on working people than the boys down at Wall Street are paying. The American people want another Bush like they want another Clinton. This show is over. I've written a book on this, Jeb and the Bush crime family, that'll be in bookstores shortly. If anybody will take a much closer look at Jeb's tenure as governor and the way he lined his pockets and made governmental decisions that benefited him and his family financial, he wouldn't even be a candidate. This show, in my opinion, is over. He's not really a contender. Not going to have much impact.
And yet there are different opinions about Jeb. For example, our parent website, Newsmax.com, features an article by our CEO, Chris Ruddy, saying Jeb Bush deserves a second look. Now, Bob, we heard all about undecided voters at the last minute in Iowa. Prompts the question, about 7% of the electorate is undecided in New Hampshire. Do you expect those folks to give Jeb a second look?
I think they're going to give everybody a second look, including Jeb Bush, but I think Ted Cruz as well. I actually think New Hampshire, I was just there on Tuesday, I think New Hampshire's wide open. I think it's anybody's game at this point. I think Trump, Rubio, and Cruz being at the top of the field, I think Rubio is now looking like he's going to have to win it or should win it. Trump obviously is in that position too, that he needs to win New Hampshire. I think Cruz is going to show well, but then you're going to see if any of these other candidates like Christie or Kasich or Bush get saved in New Hampshire. But it's wide open. New Hampshire people, the ones I've met, they're fiercely independent. And when they break late, they'll make up on their own mind of who they're going to break for.
Final word to Roger Stone. 30 seconds, Roger. Donald Trump up in double digits, up by 13% in New Hampshire. Unlike Iowa, will that remain the same way on primary night in New Hampshire?
JD, I'd like to say, ask me after the next debate. I think the next debate is crucial. Donald Trump is in a very good position to win. I frankly think, in all honesty, his main contender, his main competitor in New Hampshire is more likely Marco Rubio than Ted Cruz. But this race is wide open. Bob is absolutely right. Anything can yet happen. My money's still on Trump.
Very good. Roger Stone in New York, Bob Vander Plaats out in Iowa. Gents, we really appreciate your perspective. You heard what they had to say. Agree or disagree? We'd love to get your comments. Send them to me at newsmaxtv.com/comments. The left versus the right in our political panel. Up next.